I want you to imagine something. A single woman with no real army to her name who walks into the biggest superpower the world had ever seen and almost brings it to its knees. See, she didn't command legions of soldiers. She commanded something way more powerful, the minds of Rome's greatest generals. For 2 straight decades, she played the most dangerous political game in history, and you know what? She came incredibly close to winning. But first, we've got to get one thing straight, right from the get-go. Forget the Hollywood movies. Forget the idea of the seductive temptress. That whole story you think you know? It's basically a myth, propaganda created by her enemies. The reality is, Cleopatra was a ruthless strategist, a political mastermind whose brain was her deadliest weapon. And that's the real story we're getting into today. And here's our big idea for this whole explainer. Cleopatra wasn't just another queen on a list of powerful rulers. No, she was more dangerous than Elizabeth I, more strategically brilliant than Catherine the Great, because she faced a kind of threat they never even dreamed of. The full, undivided attention of a world-conquering empire that was absolutely hell-bent on wiping her off the map. So her story kicks off way back in 69 BC. She was born in Alexandria, but here's a fun fact. She wasn't actually Egyptian. She was a Ptolemy, which means she was Greek, descended from one of Alexander the Great's top generals. And at just 18 years old, she inherits this crown, but also a totally unstable kingdom that's about to collapse, which she has to share with her little brother, who's only 10. Talk about a tough first day on the job. So what made her so different? It was all upstairs. It was her mind. This wasn't just some royal who dabbled in things. She was a serious, hardcore scholar, fluent in at least 9 languages, a student of advanced mathematics and astronomy, a master of diplomacy. Her intellect wasn't a hobby, you guys. It was her arsenal. And this right here, this one fact, tells you everything you need to know about her political genius. For 300 years, her Greek-speaking family had ruled Egypt like foreigners in their own country. Cleopatra was the only one in 3 centuries who took the time to learn the language of her own people. That's not just cool, it was a brilliant strategic play to connect with them and prove she was their true ruler. And boy, did she need that support. By the time she was 20, her brother's advisors managed to kick her out, exiling her from her own kingdom. But Cleopatra, giving up wasn't really her style. In one of the boldest moves in history, she had herself smuggled back into the palace, famously rolled up in a carpet, to get a meeting with the visiting Roman general Julius Caesar. Now, think about that. This wasn't seduction. It was an unforgettable, high-stakes pitch for an alliance. And guess what? It totally worked. Getting Caesar on her side was just the first move in her grand strategy. Her entire rule really was defined by this incredible knack for understanding, influencing, and, manipulating the egos and ambitions of Rome's most powerful men. She learned how to turn their overwhelming strength into her personal shield. And let's be totally clear here. Her path to power was brutal. After Caesar helped her defeat her first brother's army, that brother, well, he conveniently drowned in the Nile. Then, after Caesar was assassinated, leaving her totally exposed, her younger brother husband was, suddenly poisoned. She systematically got rid of any family member who was a threat. This wasn't personal, it was pure, calculated survival. Her next great alliance, of course, was with Mark Antony. And this really shows the peak of her influence. In 34 BC, Antony stands up and declares her Queen of Kings, handing over control of huge chunks of Roman territory to her and their kids. Now, back in Rome, this wasn't just a fancy title. This was seen as straight-up treason. Antony was literally giving away their empire to a foreign queen. And that gave Antony's big rival, Octavian, the perfect excuse he was looking for. See, Octavian was a master of propaganda. He knew he couldn't just declare war on a fellow Roman like Antony, so he didn't. Instead, he declared war on Cleopatra. He painted her as this seductive, foreign monster who had enchanted a Roman hero and was threatening the very soul of Rome. He turned a civil war into a holy war against an outsider. And the propaganda worked. After their fleets were smashed at the Battle of Actium, the end came, and it came fast. Antony took his own life. Octavian's armies marched on Alexandria, and Cleopatra was trapped. He wanted her alive for one very specific reason. He dreamed of dragging her through the streets of Rome in chains, the ultimate trophy for his victory parade. But Cleopatra always had one last move. She would not be a trophy. She would not be a spectacle. Barricaded inside her own mausoleum, she took her own life, probably with a fast-acting poison. You have to see this for what it was. This wasn't an act of despair. It was her final act of defiance. She died a queen on her own terms, denying her greatest enemy his ultimate prize. So let's bring this all home. What makes her legacy so powerful? Why do we argue she was so uniquely dangerous to the world order? The answer really is all about the context of her fight.
Just look at this comparison for a second. Elizabeth I, she inherited a pretty stable kingdom and mostly had to deal with rivals at home or nearby. Catherine the Great, she was running a rising empire, focused on making it bigger and more modern. But Cleopatra, she inherited a kingdom that was already falling apart and spent her entire life fighting for its very survival against the undisputed #1 superpower on the planet. She didn't just rule, she held off the inevitable for 20 years using pretty much nothing but her wits.
And we always have to remember why her story gets twisted. The history was written by the victors. The Romans who conquered her are the ones who told her tale. They couldn't just admit that they were almost outsmarted by the political genius of a foreign queen, so they invented a character, the exotic, dangerous seductress. They had to make her a villain to justify their war and to hide just how close she came to beating them at their own game. Which brings us to a final thought. In a world of swords, shields, and legions, Cleopatra's primary weapons were diplomacy, language, and pure strategy. Her entire life forces us to ask a really fundamental question. What is real power? Maybe, just maybe, the most dangerous weapon in the ancient world wasn't an army, but a brilliant mind that knew exactly how to use it.